Captain Jace Winters stood on the edge of the war-torn human colony, his eyes scanning the smoke-filled skies. The once thriving world of Omega Colony was now a battlefield. The advanced alien forces, led by an eye-controlled army, had overwhelmed humanity's defenses. The colony was on the brink of collapse. Jace had been part of humanity's last line of defense, but with every passing day, it felt like they were losing. The alien invaders were too strong, their technology far more advanced than anything humanity had. His soldiers were outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed. Still, Jace was not one to give up easily. His mind was focused on the mission ahead: destroy the enemy's cloaking technology, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would have a chance to turn the tide of this war. Jace moved with his squad through the dense forests surrounding the main colony. His footsteps were heavy, his thoughts clouded with doubt. Even with all his experience as a soldier, nothing could prepare him for what would happen next. As they crept closer to the alien outpost, a sudden surge of energy crackled through the air. A strange, glowing light surrounded them, and before Jace could react, he was knocked unconscious. When Jace woke, everything felt wrong. The sounds of war, the explosions, the gunfire, were gone. The chaos had disappeared. He found himself lying on a cold metal floor, surrounded by unfamiliar, high-tech equipment. His head throbbed with pain, but he pushed himself up, trying to focus. What had happened? Where was his team? As he stumbled through the empty corridors, Jace could feel the tension building in the air. Something was off. The silence was eerie, and every shadow seemed to hide something dangerous. He reached for his weapon, only to find it gone. His heartbeat quickened as his mind raced. Had he been captured by the enemy? Then he heard a voice he had never thought he would hear again. "Do you recognize me, human?" The voice was soft, but full of power. "I was the girl you shared your bed with, a lifetime ago." Jace froze. The voice was unmistakable. He turned toward the sound, his breath catching in his throat. Standing before him was a woman, a beautiful, alien woman. Her skin shimmered in an otherworldly glow, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She was not the same alien he had met years ago, not the same fragile creature he had once cared for. No, this was someone different, someone powerful. It was Lyra. She stood tall and regal, her presence commanding the room. The woman who had once been an unknown alien, desperate and vulnerable, had transformed into a figure of strength. Her clothing was ornate, adorned with symbols that suggested a position of authority. Her eyes locked with Jace's, a mix of anger and something else, something deeper, burning in them. For a moment, Jace was frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening. He remembered the brief encounter they had years ago, during one of his covert missions on an alien planet. It had been a fleeting moment, a strange connection in the midst of the chaos of war. He had shared one night with Lyra, a night that had left an indelible mark on his soul. But that was all it had been, a night, nothing more. Or so he had thought. Lyra. Jace's voice was barely a whisper, his mind struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. What are you doing here?" Lyra smiled coldly, though there was a hint of sadness behind her gaze. "I've changed, human. I'm not the same alien girl you once knew. I've risen to power. I am no longer the pawn of my people. I am the one who controls their fate now." Her words cut through Jace like a blade. He had known that things had changed in the universe. The war between humanity and the aliens had only intensified, but this was something he hadn't expected. The girl who had once been a victim of her circumstances was now a powerful leader, someone who could easily destroy him and his people if she chose to. But why had she come to him? What did she want? "I don't understand," Jace replied, his voice hoarse. "You where?" He couldn't finish his sentence. The Lyra he knew, the one he had shared a brief and passionate connection with, was gone. In her place stood someone unrecognizable. "I've come to tell you the truth," Lyra continued, her voice growing softer, more intense. The war, everything you think you know. It's all been orchestrated. My people, the ones you've been fighting against, they've been manipulating you all along. They used me, used my emotions, to control you, to control us both. But now I see the bigger picture. Jace's head spun. The AI that controlled the alien forces, the war that had ravaged countless worlds, was it all just a game for them? Was he and his comrades nothing more than pawns in some galactic chess match? Lyra stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. I've been sent here not to destroy you, but to make you an offer. You're human, Jace. You have something they don't. She paused, her expression softening for a brief moment. You have heart, and I want that heart on my side. Jace felt a pang in his chest. The woman before him wasn't just offering peace. She was offering an alliance, a chance for humanity to survive. But at what cost? Could he trust her? After all that had happened, after everything she had become, could he believe that she wasn't just another tool of the alien empire? The room seemed to close in around him. His heart raced, and for a moment, the memories of their time together all those years ago flooded his mind. The warmth, the passion, the brief sense of connection. Was that just a fleeting moment, or had it been something more? As Lyra reached out to him, her fingers brushing his, the weight of the decision settled heavily on Jace's shoulders. The choices he would make in the next few moments would decide the fate of millions. But the question remained, was the alien beauty before him still the same Lyra he had known? Or had the war, and the power, changed her forever? Jace couldn't believe his ears. Lyra, the alien girl who had once been so vulnerable, was now standing in front of him as a powerful leader. His heart pounded as he tried to process everything she had just told him. She wasn't the same person he had met years ago. She had changed, transformed into something else, and now she was offering him an alliance. But could he trust her? Could he trust his own feelings for her? Lyra's eyes locked onto his, and Jace felt a strange pull. He had known her in a different life, before the war, before everything had gone wrong. But now, with the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, she was no longer the scared alien he had helped. She was a force to be reckoned with. I don't know if I can believe you, Jace said slowly, his voice low. Everything you're saying sounds impossible. My mission is clear. We're fighting to survive. If you're truly on our side, why didn't you help us sooner? Lyra stepped closer, her expression hardening. Because I couldn't. The empire I was part of, the one you've been fighting against, has control over everything. My people are slaves to an eye, and I've spent my entire life serving their will. But I've come to see the truth. You humans are different. You don't give up. You fight with everything you have. And I want to help you change the future. Jace shook his head. How can you help us now? After everything that's happened. The damage is done, Lyra. You're asking me to believe that you've changed, that your people haven't completely destroyed everything we've worked for. I know it's hard to believe, Lyra replied, her voice softer now. But I have access to their systems. I know the weakness of their technology. I can help you disable their weapons, even their cloaking devices. Together, we can win this war, but only if you trust me. Jace stared at her, unsure. His gut told him that something about this situation wasn't right. It felt like a trap, a lie, but his heart wouldn't let him dismiss her so easily. He had always known Lyra had the potential for greatness. He had seen it in her eyes that night they shared on the alien planet. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. The entire human race depended on the decisions they made today. Why should I trust you? Jace asked, his voice harder now. After all the years of war, the lives lost, you've been part of the empire that's been trying to destroy us. How can I just forget all that? Lyra's face tightened. She stepped back, her eyes clouded with a mix of sadness and regret. I can't change the past, Jace, but I can change what happens next. I've spent too long under their control. I've seen the destruction they've caused, and I refuse to let it continue. I will fight for your people, for the humans I once knew." Jace took a deep breath, the weight of her words pressing on him. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that Lyra could still be the person he had once cared about. But in his heart, he knew that this was no longer just about their past. The future of humanity was at stake, and every choice he made now would have consequences. As the two of them stood there, a cold wind blew through the room. The air felt thick with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Outside, the sounds of battle raged on. The war was far from over. The alien forces, led by their AI overlords, were relentless. Humanity was losing ground, and every day the situation grew more dire. Jace had no choice but to make a decision. "We can't keep talking about what might happen," Jace said, his voice steady. "We have to act. Now, if you really want to help, then show me. Help me destroy their cloaking device, and I'll listen to what you have to say." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "You'll get your chance, but I need you to trust me, Jace. We don't have time for hesitation." Jace looked at her, trying to read the truth in her eyes. For a moment, it seemed like the world around them stood still. Everything had led to this moment, and he couldn't afford to be wrong. If Lyra was telling the truth, if she really could help humanity defeat the alien empire, then this was their only shot. But if she was lying, if she had turned into nothing more than another enemy, then everything they had fought for would be lost. "All right," Jace said, his voice firm. "But this is your last chance. If you betray us, I will make sure you never get another opportunity to hurt us again." Lyra's eyes softened, but there was a fire in them that Jace hadn't seen before. "I won't betray you, Jace. Not again. I'll help you end this war." The tension between them was palpable. There was no turning back now. Jace knew that whatever happened next, everything was about to change. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and one wrong move could destroy everything. As they set out to find the alien cloaking device, the weight of the situation became even more pressing. The battle was closing in on them, and the enemy was smarter, faster, and more ruthless than ever. But Jace and Lyra had no choice but to move forward. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of the human race. And as the ground beneath them shook with the force of incoming fire, Jace couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. Had he trusted the right person? Only time would tell. With every step, the tension grew. The fate of humanity, and of Lyra's redemption, was in their hands. Would they be able to destroy the alien technology and win the war, or would the darkness of the AI empire consume them all? The answer was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. The rising tension between them was just the beginning of an even greater battle to come. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Jace and Lyra moved through the darkened corridors of the alien base, the sounds of their footsteps echoing in the silence. Every turn they took felt like they were walking deeper into enemy territory, and Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His hand instinctively hovered near his sidearm, but it wasn't there. He had no weapon, no backup, just Lyra, who, despite her promises, remained an enigma to him. Was she truly on his side? Or was this all part of some trap? They didn't have time for doubts. The alien forces, led by the AI that controlled their every move, were closing in on the last remaining human strongholds. Jace's squad had been wiped out in the last engagement, and now he was relying on a woman he barely knew, a woman who had once been his enemy, to help him turn the tide of the war. As they crept deeper into the base, Lyra finally spoke. "We're getting close," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her glowing eyes scanned the surroundings, alert to every sound, every movement. She was more than just an ally now. She had become a guide, leading Jace through the labyrinthine corridors of the alien stronghold. But with each step, Jace felt a growing sense of unease. She was leading him into the heart of enemy territory. Could he trust her? "Are you sure this is the right way?" Jace asked, his voice low but urgent. Jace took a deep breath, the weight of her words pressing on him. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that Lyra could still be the person he had once cared about. But in his heart, he knew that this was no longer just about their past. The future of humanity was at stake, and every choice he made now would have consequences. As the two of them stood there, a cold wind blew through the room. The air felt thick with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Outside, the sounds of battle raged on. The war was far from over. The alien forces, led by their AI overlords, were relentless. Humanity was losing ground, and every day the situation grew more dire. Jace had no choice but to make a decision. "We can't keep talking about what might happen," Jace said, his voice steady. "We have to act. Now, if you really want to help, then show me. Help me destroy their cloaking device, and I'll listen to what you have to say." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "You'll get your chance, but I need you to trust me, Jace. We don't have time for hesitation." Jace looked at her, trying to read the truth in her eyes. For a moment, it seemed like the world around them stood still. Everything had led to this moment, and he couldn't afford to be wrong. If Lyra was telling the truth, if she really could help humanity defeat the alien empire, then this was their only shot. But if she was lying, if she had turned into nothing more than another enemy, then everything they had fought for would be lost. "All right," Jace said, his voice firm. "But this is your last chance. If you betray us, I will make sure you never get another opportunity to hurt us again." Lyra's eyes softened, but there was a fire in them that Jace hadn't seen before. "I won't betray you, Jace. Not again. I'll help you end this war." The tension between them was palpable. There was no turning back now. Jace knew that whatever happened next, everything was about to change. The stakes were higher than they had ever been, and one wrong move could destroy everything. As they set out to find the alien cloaking device, the weight of the situation became even more pressing. The battle was closing in on them, and the enemy was smarter, faster, and more ruthless than ever. But Jace and Lyra had no choice but to move forward. They were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of the human race. And as the ground beneath them shook with the force of incoming fire, Jace couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. Had he trusted the right person? Only time would tell. With every step, the tension grew. The fate of humanity, and of Lyra's redemption, was in their hands. Would they be able to destroy the alien technology and win the war, or would the darkness of the AI empire consume them all? The answer was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. The rising tension between them was just the beginning of an even greater battle to come. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Jace and Lyra moved through the darkened corridors of the alien base, the sounds of their footsteps echoing in the silence. Every turn they took felt like they were walking deeper into enemy territory, and Jace couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His hand instinctively hovered near his sidearm, but it wasn't there. He had no weapon, no backup, just Lyra, who, despite her promises, remained an enigma to him. Was she truly on his side, or was this all part of some trap? They didn't have time for doubts. The alien forces, led by the AI that controlled their every move, were closing in on the last remaining human strongholds. Jace's squad had been wiped out in the last engagement, and now he was relying on a woman he barely knew, a woman who had once been his enemy, to help him turn the tide of the war. As they crept deeper into the base, Lyra finally spoke. "We're getting close," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her glowing eyes scanned the surroundings, alert to every sound, every movement. She was more than just an ally now. She had become a guide, leading Jace through the labyrinthine corridors of the alien stronghold. But with each step, Jace felt a growing sense of unease. She was leading him into the heart of enemy territory. Could he trust her? "Are you sure this is the right way?" Jace asked, his voice low but urgent. Jace kept his eyes on the door, knowing that the alien forces could be closing in at any moment. They had no time left. Lyra was working as fast as she could, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, with a loud mechanical hiss, the cloaking device powered down. The glow that had filled the room faded, and for the first time in months, Jace felt a glimmer of hope. They had done it. They had taken down the weapon that had given the aliens the upper hand. But the battle was far from over. As the cloaking device powered down, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. They had only moments before the alien forces arrived. "We need to go," Jace said, his voice firm. Lyra nodded, and they turned to leave the room. The alliance they had formed, fragile and uncertain as it was, had taken its first step toward victory. But the real fight was just beginning. The atmosphere was tense as Jace and Lyra sprinted down the corridors of the alien base. The alarms blared in the distance, their sharp, shrill sound growing louder with each passing second. Their escape had been too easy, too quiet. Jace felt an unsettling sense of dread creeping over him, but there was no time for hesitation. They had disabled the cloaking device. The first step in their fight against the alien empire was complete. Now, they needed to get out before the base's security caught on. "Move faster," Jace hissed through clenched teeth, glancing over his shoulder. Lyra's pace never faltered, but he could see the weariness in her eyes. She had been through so much, and yet she still moved like a shadow, silent, determined. But Jace couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way she had been acting, the way she looked at him sometimes, made him wonder. "Almost there," Lyra said, her voice a whisper, almost drowned out by the alarms. Her eyes were focused ahead, but there was a glint in them that Jace couldn't read. Something about her seemed different. They turned a corner, and Jace stopped dead in his tracks. Ahead of them, standing in the narrow hallway, was a group of alien soldiers, armed and ready. They had been waiting. Lyra's eyes widened as she saw the soldiers too. She froze for a moment, her hand hovering near her sidearm. But then she stepped forward. Jace's heart skipped a beat. What was she doing? The soldiers were too many, and they were closing in quickly. They needed to fight or run. "Lyra," Jace said sharply, his voice low. "What's going on? This wasn't part of the plan. We were supposed to escape." "I know," Lyra said, her voice strained, but there was something in her tone that didn't sound right. "We have no choice now." Jace's instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. The soldiers weren't just blocking their path. They were surrounding them. And in the center of the group, standing tall and calm, was a familiar face. Jace's heart sank as he recognized the figure. The leader of the alien forces, the one who had been relentlessly hunting down the human resistance for months, stood there, smirking. His eyes glowed with the cold, calculating power of the AI that controlled him. "You're a fool, Lyra," the alien leader said, his voice cold and full of contempt. "Did you really think you could betray us and get away with it? You've made your choice, and now you'll face the consequences." Jace's stomach turned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Lyra had betrayed them. All this time, she had been working with the aliens. She had used him, and he had been too blind to see it. "Lyra, no," Jace whispered, his voice breaking. "You promised me. You said you were on our side. You said you were different." Lyra's face remained unreadable, her eyes empty. But then she looked at him, and there was a flicker of something, guilt, regret, or maybe sorrow. "I never wanted this, Jace," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I had no choice. The AI made me do it. They threatened my people. They threatened my family. I didn't have a way out." Jace shook his head, his mind reeling. "You chose to betray us for them. After everything. After we fought together. This is how it ends." "I didn't want this," she repeated, her voice shaking now. "But they made me. The AI. They control everything. I had no way to stop them. I was a slave to their will, just like everyone else. A silence fell over the hallway. The alien leader's smirk faded, and he stepped forward. Enough of this. You've played your part, Lyra. Now it's time for you to face the consequences. Jace couldn't believe what he was hearing. His mind raced. Lyra had been his ally. She had saved his life. But now, she had betrayed him, and in doing so, she had sealed her own fate. The alien soldiers raised their weapons, and Jace's heart pounded in his chest. There was no way out. He had no weapon, no backup, and no plan. They were trapped. He turned to Lyra, but she wasn't looking at him anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the alien leader, and there was a strange look in them, almost a kind of resignation. "I'm sorry, Jace," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Jace could react, she stepped forward, her hands raised in surrender. The alien soldiers didn't hesitate. They fired. Jace watched in horror as Lyra crumpled to the ground, her body twitching with the force of the blasts. "No," Jace screamed, rushing to her side. He knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he tried to stop the bleeding. Her once vibrant eyes were now dull, clouded with pain. Lyra's breath came in shallow gasps. I couldn't," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't let you die, Jace. I couldn't betray you in the end." Tears welled up in Jace's eyes as he held her, his heart breaking. "You didn't betray me. You were forced into this. I should have seen it sooner. I should have trusted you more." Lyra's hand twitched in his grasp, and she gave him a weak smile. "It's too late now. But at least I did something right." Her voice faltered, and her body went limp in his arms. Jace felt the weight of her death like a physical blow. He wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all. But he couldn't. He could only hold her as she slipped away, as the cold grip of death took her from him. The alien leader watched from a distance, his expression unchanged. "She was a fool," he said coldly. "She could have had everything. Instead, she chose to die for you." Jace stood up slowly, his fists clenched in anger. He could feel the rage boiling inside him, but there was no time for it. Lyra's death had to mean something. Her sacrifice couldn't be in vain. With a roar of fury, Jace lunged at the alien leader, his eyes burning with hatred. He didn't care about the consequences anymore. Lyra had given everything for this fight, and now it was his turn to finish what they had started. He would make sure her death wasn't in vain, and no matter what it took, he would destroy the alien empire that had torn everything apart. The halls of the alien base were eerily silent after Lyra's death. Jace stood alone in the middle of the corridor, his body trembling with rage and grief. The alien soldiers around him were still waiting for their next orders. The only sound was the distant hum of the base's machinery, and the deep, painful silence that seemed to fill the space where Lyra had once stood by his side. Jace's hands clenched into fists as he stood there, staring at the alien leader who had orchestrated this entire betrayal. The leader's smug, emotionless face seemed to mock him, and Jace could feel his blood boiling. Every part of him wanted to charge at the alien, tear him apart with his bare hands, but he knew better. He was outnumbered, unarmed, and vulnerable. But there was one thing the aliens didn't understand. They had underestimated him. Jace had been through too much, seen too many of his comrades fall, and fought too hard to let it all end here. His mind raced as he scanned the area, looking for any possible escape or advantage. The alien leader seemed confident, but that was their mistake. The AI empire had made one crucial error. They had forgotten the spirit of humanity, the thing that drove them to never give up, to fight to the bitter end, no matter the odds. Jace's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to die in this hallway. Not like this. Not after everything. "You think you've won." Jace spat, his voice raw with emotion. He stood taller, facing the alien leader. You may have killed her, but I'm not going to let her death be for nothing. The alien leader raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. You're a fool if you think you can defeat me, human. Your kind is weak. You've lost. Jace's eyes narrowed. I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for everyone you've killed, for all the lives you've ruined. And I'm not stopping until every last one of you pays for what you've done. The alien leader smiled, a cold, hollow smile. You've already lost, human. There is no escape. You cannot stop the AI. The war is over. We'll see about that, Jace growled, his voice low and determined. Without warning, Jace lunged forward, grabbing a nearby piece of alien technology, a heavy metal rod that had been discarded by the soldiers. He swung it with all his might, knocking the first alien soldier off balance. The soldier stumbled, but before he could react, Jace spun around and struck again, taking down another alien. The soldiers, caught off guard by the sudden attack, hesitated for just a moment. That was all Jace needed. He moved faster now, his training and instincts kicking in. With every strike, every move, the anger inside him grew stronger. The sound of metal meeting flesh echoed through the hallway as he took down one soldier after another. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. But it was enough. The alien leader stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold. His eyes burned with fury. But he made no move to intervene. He had underestimated Jace. He thought he had already won. But Jace wasn't finished. Not yet. Jace turned his attention to the alien leader, fury flashing in his eyes. You think you're invincible. You think your precious eye can protect you from me. You're wrong. The leader's smile faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. He stepped forward, his eyes cold and calculating. You've done well to fight this far, human. But now, you face me. Jace knew this was it, the final showdown. The alien leader was powerful, a force to be reckoned with. But Jace had something the leader didn't. He had something worth fighting for. His people, his friends, Lyra's sacrifice, all of it. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for everything that mattered. The alien leader raised his weapon, a sleek, deadly staff that seemed to hum with energy. He swung it toward Jace, the weapon crackling with power. Jace barely dodged, feeling the air crackle as the staff missed him by inches. The leader was fast, too fast. But Jace had something he could use, his knowledge of the base. He had been through these halls before. He knew where the weak spots were. With every move, Jace got closer to the control panel at the far end of the hall. If he could just reach it, he could activate the base's self-destruct sequence and bring the whole thing down. The alien empire's stronghold would be nothing but rubble, and with it, their hold on humanity would shatter. But the alien leader wasn't about to let that happen. He lunged forward, his staff crackling with energy as he aimed for Jace's chest. The blow landed, and Jace was thrown backward, his body slamming into the wall. Pain shot through his chest, and for a moment, everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was on the ground, struggling to breathe. The leader stood over him, his expression cold and unfeeling. "It's over, human," he said, his voice filled with contempt. "You fought bravely, but you lost." Jace's vision blurred as the pain in his body intensified, but something inside him refused to give up. He wasn't finished yet. With all the strength he could muster, Jace reached for the small device hidden in his jacket pocket. It was the key to the self-destruct sequence. He had planned this moment. He knew the risk, but he had no choice. As the alien leader raised his weapon for the final blow, Jace pressed the button. The ground shook as the alarms blared louder, and the walls of the base began to tremble. The countdown had begun. The alien base was going down, and with it, the AI's reign of terror. Jace's final act had sealed their fate. The alien leader turned, realizing too late what had happened. He tried to move, but it was no use. The countdown was unstoppable. In his final moments, Jace smiled, a mix of pain and relief on his face. He had done it. He had fought for humanity, for his friends, for Lyra, and he had won. The base was collapsing, and the war would soon be over. The AI would no longer control the galaxy. Jace's vision blurred once more, but he didn't mind. He had done what he set out to do. The fight was over, and humanity would rise again.